We may never get to the bottom of the killing of Vladlen Tatarsky. A young woman arrives at a St Petersburg cafe, small package in hands, moments before a bomb, allegedly hidden in a bust she's carrying, of Tatarsky, tears through the entire ground floor. The notorious pro-Russian propagandist had just been handed his gift, had been joking with the nationalist crowd who'd gathered to hear him speak. The woman departed straight away. The explosion left Tatarsky dead, 30 more injured. The woman, Daria Tropova, is arrested, tells Russian police she would explain later who gave her the bust, which is a very big question. But first, who was Tatarsky? Well, he's not actually called Vladlen. Real name, Maxim Fomin. He's had a few careers. His latest identity, military agitator, provocateur. At a Kremlin event recently, bragging about the destruction of Ukraine. We will beat everyone. We will kill everyone. We will rob everyone, he crowed. Born in Donbass, he's been a coal miner and convicted bank robber, but he escaped from jail and affiliated himself with the mercenary Wagner Group, which is where things get even more interesting. Yesterday, the head of the Wagner Group, Evgeny Prigozhin, claimed Russia has now retaken Bakhmut, which Ukraine disputes. But Prigozhin and his allies are on fractious terms with the Kremlin. Tatarsky Fomin himself, an increasingly outspoken critic of Russia's military. Did his rhetoric just go too far? Moscow pointed the finger at activists linked to jailed opposition leader Alexei Navalny alongside Ukrainian intelligence. But Kyiv likened the bomb to Russian spiders eating each other in a jar. President Zelensky said he was focused on the carnage in his country.
I'm not thinking what's going on in St Petersburg or in Moscow. They have to think, Russia has to think about their cities. I'm thinking about our country and our cities.
Ian Garner knows Tatarsky and his confidants well, having just written a book about him. Who do you think did it?
I'm not going to say, and here's why. We are living in a world of misinformation and disinformation where the FSB has solved this crime, as they always do with crimes of this nature, within hours of its passing. They've already chosen the culprit, explained exactly what happened, and assured the public everything is fine. Ukraine will want to be putting out counter-narratives that spin things for its own purposes. We won't know the truth about this for months, years, potentially ever.
Russia has now reclassified the bomb as a terrorist incident. Daria Tropova, the woman arrested by the FSB, is a seasoned anti-war activist, but her husband says she's been set up.
Kamian Zerham reporting. Well, joining me now is Professor Joshua Tucker, who's director at the Jordan Center for Advanced Russian Studies, also here in New York at New York University. Professor Tucker, thanks for coming on the program. What do you think is going on here?
Thanks so much for having me. It's a complicated situation, of course, and right now, the game that's being played here is everybody trying to use this for their own maximal advantage to happen here. So at this point, this is the second time we've seen this happen to a vocal supporter of the war, in this case, Tatarsky, previously Daria Dugina, who are killed in Russian proper in an attack. What we're going to find in the aftermath of this is lots of different potential explanations for who did this, why they may have done it, and what may be the outcome of it. So you're hearing different things from Russia, you're hearing different things from Ukraine, you're even hearing different things from within Russia.
So the Ukrainians have rather colourfully described it as spiders consuming each other, eating themselves in a jar. Do you subscribe to that theory? Is that where your hunch goes?
I mean, it's very hard, as your previous interview said, this just happened. There's obviously, this was planned. This was something that was carried out, but there's lots of different potential explanations for it. From the point of view of the Russians, they're going to cast this as what would look, obvious to people from the outside. Maybe this had something to do with Ukraine, but the Ukrainians have turned around and said maybe this has something to do with internal Russian domestic politics. What we know is there are differences of opinion within Russia about how the war should be going. We heard commentary in the story just now about the Prigozhin group and where Prigozhin is thinking on this. This is possible that this is a matter of internal Russian domestic politics. It's possible that it's a matter of something having to do with the Ukrainians. We just don't know at this point in time. And outsiders speculating on this in some senses is counterproductive. What we do know is that the Russians are going to try to use this event to, as the previous speaker said, they want to reassure the population there's no risk here, but at the same respect, they're going to try to spin this in a way that's beneficial for the war efforts within Russia. So they're going to try to pin this on Ukraine. They're going to try to pin this on potentially domestic opposition within Russia.
So, I mean, we hear very little from the, pro-Navalny crowd who are against this war, partly because they've either left the country or they're too afraid to speak out. But we hear quite a lot from the pro-war crowd that thinks that this war has been very badly conducted, including the man who's just been killed. Is that a real threat for Vladimir Putin, do you think? The nationalist, pro-war extremists, if you like, who think that he's run a lousy war?
It is a threat. I mean, it depends what we think. We tend to think in the West about the threats to someone like Putin in the form of, say, the colored revolutions, where you have a mass uprising that wants to push out a more dictatorial autocrat and replace them with free and fair elections. But there are other sources of threats to power. Now, whether those on the right who are pushing Putin to conduct the war more vigorously, the sort of nationalist forces within Russia, and which are, personified by Tatarsky, and what's kind of been the emergence of this pro-war blogger community here, that it can be quite influential. Whether it's a threat in terms of potentially removing Putin from power, it's a different type of question from what we thought about with these sort of people power protests to bring in democratic reform. But on the other hand, it does box him in terms of potentially limiting options, knowing that if certain types of actions are taken or not taken, that there's going to be a chorus of criticism from the right. Now, why they are allowed to speak in a way that the anti-war opposition is allowed to speak, I think comes down to the simple matter of they're pro-war. They are pushing the narrative that the Russian government wants to push. On the other hand, it's an open question about how far a line they can push here.
Okay, got to leave it there. Joshua Tucker, thank you very much indeed.